Greetings to all C3RF members and friends across Canada and indeed around the world, and a special welcome to the folks at Veterans for Freedom on their dedicated streaming channels to view this video summary of the C3RF update for 14 June 2024. The title of this update is Under Attack, and it kicks off noting that theoretical evolutionary biologist Brett Weinstein is no laggard when it comes to insightful and authoritative contributions to actual rather than pseudoscience. His published work includes groundbreaking revelations on the dangers associated with assuming that telomeric similarities between mice and humans justify current developmental techniques associated with the formulation of new drugs. Indeed, he noted that such assumptions pose definitive risks in the form of heart disease, liver dysfunction, and related organ failure. One can see where the work of the good doctor might rile the sensibilities of a big pharma so tightly coupled with the maintenance of current drug design techniques, and, true to form, Weinstein has been taken to the woodshed on more than one occasion for such transgressions. Blasphemy. Weinstein would ultimately leave the hallowed halls of academia to pursue the advocacy of real science with his wife Heather Hine through his Dark Horse podcast. As he progressed his new search for the truth, he would find that he was not pilloried so much for the correctness of the information he brought into the public realm, but for the fact that he would try to shine a light on such in the first place. Indeed, he would come to the conclusion that when it came to combating the Wuhan virus, we were not seeing the best efforts of those responsible for mitigating the impact of a pandemic, but were rather witnessing the coming together of bits and pieces to produce a pattern of breathtaking evil. He would expand on such thoughts during Geneva demonstrations attended by thousands of concerned citizens on 1 June 2024. These folks were protesting the close of World Health Organization deliberations aimed at instituting a worldwide pandemic treaty. In his Geneva address, Mr. Weinstein wasted no time in stating flatly that we are under attack. In his mind, the belligerents are a small minority of globalists that are engaged in nothing less than the total subjugation of the rights and freedoms of the mass of humanity. He sees the rise of a new feudal state where lords rule over serfs and where rank-and-file citizens are dispossessed of any ability to realize their own life dreams. He also notes that the instating of this new world is in jeopardy by virtue of serfdom's access to newly minted internet communications platforms. Indeed, the lords are mad as hell that the serfs continue to exercise an ability to pull back the curtain on their freedom-crushing activities. And so it is that the cabal must, as a priority, curtail our speech while rewriting all the rules in the name of pandemic preparedness. In closing, Weinstein affirms that the good folk of the world do not give their consent to such incursions on their freedoms and will not comply. Many may take hope in the fact that the recent WHO deliberations failed to secure an agreement on a worldwide pandemic treaty despite the best efforts of Canadian bureaucrats. Such hope, however, can be seen to be of a false variety, as a Director General of the World Health Organization declared victory in getting all of the member nations to sign on to the treaty's affiliated international health regulations. One step back, two forward brings to mind an earlier time when I was studying Soviet operational doctrine at the height of the Cold War in 1986. The related studies taken at the year-long Canadian Forces Command and Staff College analyzed Soviet divisional army tactics that emphasized the execution of probing attacks dedicated to finding weak points in enemy defenses, penetrate wherever they can, develop penetrations, and carry the attack as deeply as possible thereafter. The failure of the WHO to secure an international pandemic treaty may prevent that particular organization from usurping national authority in the field of public health, but the past international health regulations bind signatory nations to form their own IHR authorities and coordinate surveillance, financial, and logistics requirements associated with pandemics as newly defined. In essence, the new regulations pave the way for a repeat of the failed practices and policies that were foisted upon the world during the Wuhan virus pandemic, as nations act as required to provide, I quote, rapid, equitable, and enhanced coordination international action with whole-of-government and whole-of-society approaches, end quote. As well, and even as the national international health regulation authorities carry out plans and policies handed down by the WHO, negotiations continue apace that will eventually see a worldwide pandemic treaty put in place. Probing attacks, indeed. The fact that the newly approved international health regulations serve as an effective placeholder for an eventual international pandemic treaty can be seen in their emphasis on exclusive and draconian measures. As was the case during the Wuhan virus pandemic, one-size-fits-all medical products in the form of vaccines and gene-based therapies, along with internationally coordinated quarantine measures, will be stressed. Opposition to these and other freedom-crushing initiatives that bind individual nations will not be countenanced. This, as the regulations call for states to build up core capacities to prevent misinformation and disinformation that might discredit the measures being foisted upon citizens. According to public health analyst James Roguski, the recently adopted amendments, quote, will facilitate an enormous global buildup of the pharmaceutical hospital emergency industrial complex, which seeks to trigger ongoing pandemic emergencies that will be made even worse by relevant health products, end quote. If one can make a comparison with the Soviet Army divisional probing attack tactics and the WHO's approach to securing a worldwide health hegemony, after all, both speak to a desire to use militaristic strategies to destroy whole armies or civilizations. One inspired intelligence expert in the form of Major Stephen Coughlin, retired, sees such a possibility arising from the published 1999 thesis authored by two People's Liberation Army colonels during their Chinese War College studies. Their paper revealed a confident new world power in the form of China that has no problem in boldly and publicly outlining a war doctrine based on the perceived fact that, quote, America's inability to recognize political warfare threats is so degraded it may have lost the capability to do so, end quote. This doctrine would end-run American military strengths by exploiting and prioritizing its lines of effort against America's most exploitable vulnerabilities through hybrid information and political warfare. Discerning folks have cause for concern, as Major Coughlin has a proven track record of making fact and intelligence-based prognostications that have proven true. To this day, he is renowned as the United States military's most credible security analyst by virtue of his post-9/11 red pill briefings to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. These briefings brought clarity to the Sharia underpinnings of terrorist war doctrine during the War on Terror and were ultimately responsible for his firing under charges of Islamophobia. Coughlin would go on to accurately forecast the advent of the Arab Spring by noting the confluence of Islamic State, institutional, and operational elements in calling for a transition to kinetic energy. His wealth of knowledge and actionable intelligence on Islamic warfighting doctrine would then be crystallized in his magnum opus, Catastrophic Failure, Blindfolding America in the Face of Jihad. Not to be defined and constrained by his success as an analyst of Islamic war doctrine, Coughlin would move on to do a deep dive on the Maoist strategies called up by our two PLA colonels in 1999. Accordingly, he would outline the threats posed by coordinated lines of effort, operation, and action in his memorandums. One memorandum, Remembering the Misremembered Left, and another, Warning on Racism. Both were written in 2019, and both predicted the unprecedented violence of the summer of 2020 in the United States. The research and historical deep dive that led Coughlin to his conclusion that we are in the midst of a political and information warfare effort to take down our Western civilization are succinctly chronicled in his 3-hour video entitled The Strategic Nature of the War Against Civilization. His briefing offers a transformative experience that cuts through the false narratives that are exploding around the good folk of Canada and provides a clarity capable of rendering the seemingly insane changes in our society understandable. As Coughlin states, it's time to stop believing what you know and start knowing what you see. In closing, a reminder to join us at www.canadiancitizens.org, where you can see this update in its full glory, including all of the links to all of the documents it cites. Simply go to the News tab at the top of the page and select C3RF Member Updates from its drop-down menu. Until next time, this is Russ Cooper signing off and wishing you and yours much happiness and freedom from C3RF.